To escape a forced marriage, a young waitress boldly kissed her guest, not knowing he was a millionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The chandeliers sparkled above like frozen fireworks, but for her, the ballroom felt like a cage. Emma, a 22-year-old waitress from a small diner downtown, stood at the center of the grand stage in a borrowed satin dress. Her heart raced with a panic that made her palms sweat. This was not her world. She belonged behind a tray, carrying water glasses, not here under the watchful eyes of hundreds of strangers. Beside her, the man her family had chosen as her fiancé smirked with pride, as though he had just purchased a new piece of property. His family was wealthy, powerful, and had agreed to save her parents from debt if Emma married their son. Tonight's engagement party was not a celebration, it was a transaction. Her father's hand pressed against her back, pushing her toward the microphone. "Smile," he hissed, his voice trembling with both hope and fear. The band quieted, and the spotlight fell on her. The master of ceremonies announced her name as if she were a prize being unveiled. Emma's chest tightened. Applause thundered around her, but in her ears it was only the sound of chains. She wanted to scream, to run, to vanish. She caught sight of her reflection in the champagne flutes on the nearest table. Her eyes glistened with tears that threatened to fall. Her gaze darted across the crowd, desperate for an escape. And then she saw him. A man seated at the VIP table, dressed simply in a dark suit. He was not clapping, he was watching. His eyes, sharp yet calm, met hers across the distance. For a split second, it was as if he could see through the facade, straight into the storm raging inside her. Emma's fiancé reached for her hand, raising it in front of the audience. The cameras flashed, ready to capture the perfect photograph of a perfect couple. That was the moment her lungs refused to breathe. "No!" her mind screamed. Before she even realized what she was doing, her body moved on instinct. She yanked her hand free, dashed down the steps, and in front of the entire crowd, she stopped at the stranger's chair. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Every head turned as the music screeched to a halt. Emma leaned forward, her heart hammering louder than the stunned silence. Without asking, without thinking, she pressed her lips against his. A bold, reckless kiss. The room exploded with shock. Her fiancé's mother shrieked. The guests whispered furiously. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Emma pulled away, her breath shaking, her face burning with humiliation and defiance. She expected him to push her back, to expose her foolishness. But instead, the man looked at her with unreadable eyes, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else she could not name. In that moment, Emma thought she had only chosen a stranger to save herself. She had no idea that the man she had just kissed, in front of everyone, was not only a guest, he was a millionaire whose life was about to become entangled with hers forever. The echo of gasps still trembled through the ballroom as Emma's lips left the stranger's. For a single suspended heartbeat, the world seemed frozen. Then, chaos erupted. Her fiancé's face turned crimson, his hand slamming against the table in rage. His mother shrieked her name like a curse, while her father's expression twisted with horror, as though everything he had gambled on had just gone up in flames. "Emma, what have you done?" Her father's voice thundered across the room, thick with fear. The guests began whispering, their voices sharp as blades. Did she just kiss him? Who is that man? What kind of shameless stunt is this? Cameras flashed wildly, capturing her humiliation from every angle. Emma's body trembled, her breath uneven, but she refused to look away from the man she had chosen in desperation. The stranger did not push her aside. He simply studied her with a calm, unreadable face. That silence was more dangerous than any reaction. Her so-called fiancé stormed down from the stage, his shoes striking the marble floor like gunshots. "You humiliated me, you pathetic girl," he spat, grabbing Emma's wrist so tightly that she winced. The crowd gasped louder. Her knees weakened, but before she could cry out, The stranger rose from his chair. "Let her go." His voice was low but firm, carrying through the heavy air. For a moment, the ballroom froze again. The stranger's presence radiated a quiet authority that made even the arrogant fiancé hesitate. Emma felt her wrist freed as the man let go in frustration, his eyes filled with contempt. "You will regret this," he hissed before storming off, dragging his outraged parents behind him. The master of ceremonies stuttered, unsure how to continue. The guests erupted into scandalous murmurs. Emma's father tried to salvage the situation by apologizing to everyone, his face pale with shame. But the damage was done. She had destroyed everything in one reckless moment. By the next morning, her name was on the local news headlines: "Waitress causes scandal at society gala." The restaurant where she worked received angry calls from wealthy clients, demanding her dismissal. Her boss, unable to withstand the pressure, called her into his office. He avoided her eyes as he handed her the envelope. "I am sorry, Emma. You are a good worker, but I cannot risk the reputation of the restaurant." Emma clutched the envelope, her stomach hollow, her throat burning with humiliation. She had not only lost her chance to escape her family's grip, she had lost her job, her dignity, and her place in the world she had fought to hold on to. But just as she walked out into the gray morning, clutching her small box of belongings, a black car pulled up beside her. The tinted window lowered, revealing the man from the gala. His eyes were steady, almost unsettling in how much they seemed to see. "Get in," he said simply. Emma froze. She had kissed him without his permission. She had dragged him into her mess. Yet here he was, waiting for her. I should not," she whispered, hugging the box closer. "I have already ruined enough." "Ower." He leaned slightly, his voice calm but commanding. "You ruined nothing. You saved yourself. And now, I am offering you a way out." Her breath caught. "A way out?" "Yes," he replied. "I need something. And you need freedom. Sit down and let us talk about a deal." Emma's heart pounded. Every instinct told her to run. But where could she go? With her job gone, her family furious, and her future shattered, she had no lifeline left. The memory of her father's angry grip, the humiliation in the ballroom, the sneering faces of the wealthy, all of it burned inside her. Slowly, with trembling hands, she opened the door and stepped inside the car. The stranger leaned back, his gaze sharp but unreadable. "You are bold," he said softly. "That kiss was not planned, but it may have been the smartest move of your life." Emma swallowed hard, unsure whether she had just entered her salvation or another kind of cage. Inside the car, silence wrapped around them, broken only by the hum of the engine. Emma sat stiffly with the box of her belongings on her lap, her eyes darting to the man who now seemed even more mysterious than he had the night before. He rested comfortably against the leather seat, his posture calm, his gaze fixed on her with unnerving focus. "I know what you are thinking," he said at last, his voice steady and controlled. "You are wondering why I have brought you here. You are wondering if I am going to demand an explanation for that kiss." Emma swallowed hard, gripping the edges of her box. "I do not expect forgiveness. I acted without thinking. You should hate me." He tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Hate you? No. If anything, I admire your boldness. It was reckless, yes. But sometimes recklessness is exactly what exposes the truth. You did not want that marriage. That much was clear." Emma's throat tightened. "I wanted to survive, that is all." His eyes softened for a moment, then grew sharp again. "And survival requires choices. I have one for you, a proposal. Not of love, do not mistake me, but of convenience. A contract." Her breath caught. "A contract?" He nodded. "You need protection. From your family, from their schemes, from the scandal that is already spreading. You need a shield. I need someone who can stand beside me, convincingly, in front of my board of directors and the press. My family expects me to be engaged. They expect me to show stability, but I have no intention of letting them dictate who I should marry. That is where you come in." Emma stared at him, stunned. "You are suggesting a fake engagement?" "Precisely," he said without hesitation. "You will be my fiancée for a limited period. We will sign a written agreement. You will follow certain rules. In return, I will ensure that you are safe, provided for, and untouchable by the people who want to use you. When the contract ends, we will part ways, cleanly." Emma's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. It sounded insane, too dangerous, too unreal. Why me? You could choose anyone, someone from your world, someone polished and perfect. Why me, a waitress who has nothing to offer? For the first time, his eyes glimmered with something almost like humor. "Because you are not from my world. That makes you unpredictable. It makes you honest. And because you already kissed me in front of hundreds of witnesses. Like it or not, the world has begun to link our names. That gives you leverage, Emma." She looked down at her trembling hands, struggling to breathe evenly. The thought of pretending to be his fiancé, of stepping into a world so different from hers, terrified her. Yet the alternative was far worse. Returning home meant more pressure, more humiliation, more control. At least this way, she had a choice. "What are the rules?" she asked quietly. His expression hardened, becoming businesslike. "Rule 1. You will not interfere with my personal life or ask about matters that do not concern you. Rule 2. In public, you will act as though you are truly my partner. Hand in hand, smiles, the performance must be flawless. Rule 3. This contract is temporary. Do not mistake it for something real." Emma's lips parted, but no words came. The weight of his voice, the finality in it, left no space for doubt. He reached into his pocket and placed something small in her hands, a folded handkerchief. She blinked in confusion, recognizing it as the very one he had offered her discreetly after the kiss the night before, when she was on the verge of tears. "You left this behind," he said softly. "Consider it collateral. When this is over, I expect it back." Emma held the fabric as though it were fragile glass. Her chest ached with something she could not name. A contract, a lie. Yet inside this lie was her only chance at freedom. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "All right. I will do it. I will sign your contract." His smirk returned, sharper this time. "Good. Then welcome, Emma. From this moment forward, you are my fiancée." Her world tilted as the car pulled away, carrying her not back to the life she knew, but into the beginning of a masquerade that would test every boundary of her heart. Emma had thought that agreeing to the contract would buy her silence, that the world might forget her scandal after a few quiet days. But she was wrong. From the very next morning, she found herself thrust into a whirlwind of appearances and obligations that left her dizzy. The man whose name she now knew was Alexander did not waste time. A sleek black limousine arrived at her small apartment before sunrise. Inside the car, an assistant handed her a designer dress still wrapped in silk. "You will need to look the part," the woman said briskly, offering Emma a smile that did not reach her eyes. Emma's fingers shook as she slipped into the elegant fabric, the material alien against her skin. She had spent her life in cotton uniforms and second-hand coats, never in something that shimmered under the morning sunday. When she stepped out, Alexander gave her a quick glance. No comment, no compliment, just a small nod. It was as if he expected her to transform into someone else overnight. Their first public outing was a charity luncheon filled with the city's wealthiest figures. Cameras clicked the moment they stepped from the limousine, flashes so bright Emma could hardly see. Alexander offered his hand. She hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers into his. His grip was steady, firm. The only anchor in a storm of stares. "Smile," he murmured without turning his head. "Do not let them see your fear." Emma forced her lips to curve. Every step she took beside him felt like walking a tightrope suspended high above ground. Inside the banquet hall, waiters carried trays of champagne. She felt a pang of irony, remembering that she had once been one of them. Now, she stood as a guest of honor, the fiancée of a man she barely knew. Conversations hushed as they entered. Emma could feel eyes tracing every detail, the borrowed elegance of her gown, the awkward way she held herself, the small tremor in her hand. Women whispered behind manicured fingers, while men raised their brows with open skepticism. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "A waitress, I heard." How absurd. Emma's cheeks burned, but she remembered Alexander's words. She lifted her chin and tightened her grip on his arm. To her surprise, he leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Good. Hold on to me. Let them talk." For a moment their eyes met. Something flickered there, approval perhaps, or the faintest spark of respect. It steadied her. Throughout the luncheon, Emma played her role. She smiled when introduced. She laughed at polite jokes. She pretended to belong. Yet each moment felt like walking across glass. Every slip, every stutter, every hesitation might expose her as an imposter. The test came when Alexander's former girlfriend appeared, tall, elegant, dressed in red that commanded the room. She approached with a smile sharp as a blade. "Alexander?" she said smoothly, her gaze flicking toward Emma. "And this must be the fiancé I have read about." Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. The woman extended a perfectly manicured hand. Emma accepted it, her palm clammy, but she kept her eyes steady. "Yes, I am Emma." The woman's smile widened, though her eyes glinted with malice. "A pleasure. I imagine all of this must feel overwhelming for you." Emma wanted to shrink, but Alexander's hand brushed lightly against hers under the table, grounding her. "Overwhelming, yes," Emma answered softly, then added with surprising strength. "But not impossible." The woman's smirk faltered. Alexander gave the slightest nod, a silent acknowledgement that Emma had passed a test she did not even know she was taking. As the luncheon ended, Emma realized her pulse had not slowed since the moment she stepped from the limousine. The performance was exhausting. Yet as she sat beside Alexander in the car afterward, she caught her reflection in the window. She did not see only fear. She saw a woman learning to stand taller, even when her knees shook. Alexander finally spoke, his voice low. "Not bad. You did better than I expected." Emma exhaled, clutching the handkerchief still hidden in her purse. She had survived one day in his world. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a game where every glance, every touch, every word mattered. And the longer she played, the harder it became to remember that all of it was supposed to be pretend. The weeks that followed were a blur of appearances, photographs, and whispers. Everywhere Emma went, eyes followed her. Every dinner, every charity gala, every stroll out of Alexander's townhouse became another test of whether she could survive in a world that had never been built for her. She told herself again and again that it was only an act, a temporary arrangement, nothing more. But the more she tried to remind herself, the more the lines blurred. At night, when the makeup was washed away and the borrowed gowns hung limply on their racks, Emma often sat alone on the balcony of the townhouse, staring at the city lights. She thought about the life she had lost, the small diner where she had poured coffee and wiped tables. That life had been simple, exhausting, but it had been hers. Now, she was trapped in a glittering cage, her every step orchestrated to maintain the illusion of being Alexander's fiancée. It was during one of these nights that the first crack in their fragile truce appeared. She overheard Alexander's relatives arguing in the next room. "She is beneath us," one voice hissed. "A waitress parading as a fiancée. Do you not see the humiliation this brings to the family name?" Emma froze. The words pierced her, even though she had already imagined them whispered behind closed doors. She should have walked away, but her feet would not move. When Alexander entered the balcony later, he found her clutching the railing, her face pale. "You heard them," he said quietly. Emma turned toward him, her voice breaking. "Do you agree with them? Am I just a shield? A performance for your family and your board?" His jaw tightened, but he did not answer right away. That silence stung more than cruelty. She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I thought I could endure this, but maybe I was a fool." The next morning, the tabloids splashed her photograph across their covers. A rival had leaked details of her past, twisting her years of honest work into something shameful. "From coffee stains to champagne glasses," one headline sneered. Another called her a gold-digging waitress. The humiliation was unbearable. Strangers mocked her online. Former colleagues avoided her calls. Even her family, who had once forced her into marriage, now acted as though she was the one who had disgraced them. Emma packed her bag, her hands trembling. The contract, the pretense, the borrowed happiness, it was all too much. She left a note on the kitchen counter. I cannot do this anymore. When Alexander returned that evening and found the townhouse empty, his expression darkened. He picked up the note, his jaw set, his eyes clouded with something he refused to name. For the first time since their arrangement began, the possibility of losing her felt real. And somewhere in the city, Emma walked alone, her small suitcase dragging behind her, unsure if she had freed herself from a cage or abandoned the only person who had truly begun to see her. The ballroom was overflowing once again, this time for a press conference that Alexander's family had arranged to showcase his stability as the heir of their empire. The chandeliers blazed overhead, casting their golden light on polished marble and glittering gowns. Every reporter in the city was present. Every camera pointed toward the stage where Alexander was expected to speak. Yet there was one glaring absence: Emma. She had been gone for 3 days. The tabloids had already begun circling, suggesting that the engagement was a hoax, a publicity stunt to distract from business scandals. His relatives whispered among themselves, pleased that the waitress problem seemed to have solved itself. But Alexander stood at the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd, sharp and unyielding. The questions came fast and ruthless. Where is your fiancée? Is it true she left you? Was the engagement a lie? Each word was another stone hurled at the carefully crafted image. His board of directors sat stiffly in the front row, their patience thin. Alexander lifted his hand, silencing the room. His voice was steady, but his chest tightened with the weight of the moment. You want the truth? Very well. The woman you all mock as a waitress, the woman you call unworthy of this family's name, she is the only person in this entire room who has ever stood by me without asking for anything in return. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His relatives shifted uncomfortably, scandal etched across their faces. Alexander did not flinch. You ask if this engagement is real, he continued. Let me be perfectly clear. It is real. She is not a performance. She is not a contract. She is not a mistake. She is the woman I intend to marry. The cameras exploded with flashes. Reporters shouted over one another, desperate to capture every word. But Alexander pressed forward, his voice rising above the storm. And in case you have forgotten, yes, I am a millionaire. I am the heir to an empire that spans industries across this nation. I do not need validation from any of you. But I will use every ounce of that power to protect her name and her dignity. The declaration struck the crowd like a thunderclap. The whispers turned into uproar. Some accused him of recklessness, others of foolish romance. Yet in that chaos, his words carved through the noise like a blade. As he stepped down from the podium, Alexander's assistant rushed to his side. Sir, are you certain about this? You have just defied your entire family and every expectation placed on you. Alexander's jaw tightened. I am certain. Unbeknownst to him, Emma stood at the back of the hall, clutching her worn suitcase. She had come only to return the handkerchief, to give back the small token that had begun their strange bond. But as she listened, frozen in the shadows, her heart clenched. The man she had thought cold and calculated had just shattered his own world to shield her. Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, Emma realized that what began as a reckless kiss had become something neither of them could pretend away any longer. The contract might have been fake, but the feelings blooming between them were terrifyingly real. The crowd still roared with questions as Alexander stepped away from the podium, but he did not look back. His gaze went straight to the back of the hall where Emma stood, half hidden in the shadows, with her small suitcase by her side. For a moment, the noise of the reporters faded, the lights dimmed, and there was only her. Emma's breath caught as he walked toward her, each step measured and certain. She wanted to turn and flee, but her feet refused to move. When he reached her, he did not scold or question her. Instead, he reached into his pocket and unfolded a piece of fabric. You left something behind, he said, his voice softer now, meant for her ears alone. In his palm rested the handkerchief, the same one he had pressed into her hand on the night she kissed him in desperation. Emma's throat tightened. She had carried that handkerchief like a secret talisman, tucked into her purse, a reminder of the moment when everything had changed. And now, here it was again, not as collateral for a contract, but as proof of something deeper. He placed it gently into her trembling hands. From the beginning, Emma, I knew you were different. That night was reckless. yes. But it was also honest. You did not see me as a millionaire or a name in the papers. You saw me as a man. That is why I am standing here, defying everyone else. Because with you, I am not a title. I am just Alexander. Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks, her fingers curling tightly around the handkerchief. It was small, insignificant cloth, but it carried the weight of every unspoken word, every moment they had survived together. Around them, the crowd buzzed, cameras flashing, voices rising. Yet in that circle of light, it felt as if the world had fallen away. Emma whispered, her voice breaking, "I never wanted to be a burden to you." He shook his head, his eyes fierce and unwavering. "You have never been a burden. You have been the only truth in my life." Oh, the handkerchief, once just a scrap of fabric, had become their symbol. Not of scandal, not of a contract, but of something real. And as she held it to her heart, Emma realized that no amount of whispers or headlines could erase what it meant. For the first time since that fateful kiss, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps this love was not a mistake at all. The press conference did not end with applause. It ended with fury. Alexander's family stormed out of the ballroom, their faces pale with rage. His relatives hissed accusations about betrayal and irresponsibility. The board of directors muttered about instability. And in the center of it all, Emma stood clutching the handkerchief, feeling as if every eye still tried to tear her apart. But the tide began to turn. The more the media replayed Alexander's words, the more the public questioned the cruelty of the elite. Commentators began to ask why a woman's past as a waitress should disqualify her from love. Online, strangers rallied behind Emma, praising her courage and condemning the hypocrisy of those who judged her. Meanwhile, the family who had once tried to sell her into a forced marriage could no longer hide in the shadows. Reporters unearthed their financial schemes, exposing how they had tried to use Emma as a bargaining chip to erase their debts. Their reputation collapsed overnight. The very people who had humiliated Emma now found themselves disgraced before the same society they had tried to impress. Emma watched it unfold with disbelief. For so long she had been the powerless one, the girl without a voice. Now, the truth was her shield. Justice did not roar like thunder. It whispered through headlines and quiet nods of support, through the relief of seeing her name defended rather than mocked. Alexander stood beside her through it all, never wavering. He ignored the demands of his board, he silenced the venom of his relatives, and he made it clear that no amount of pressure would change his choice. When journalists pressed him again about whether he regretted his defiance, he looked straight into the camera and answered, "The only thing I would regret is letting her go." For Emma, it was not the wealth, not the protection, not even the grand declarations that mattered most. It was the simple fact that someone had finally stood with her, not because of what she could provide, but because of who she was. The people who had once mocked her as a waitress were now forced to face the truth, and the family who had tried to control her had lost their power over her forever. At last, Emma was free. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the weight of everything they had endured. Emma stood on the terrace of Alexander's townhouse, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. She held the handkerchief against her chest, no longer as collateral, but as a reminder of how far she had come. Alexander joined her quietly, his footsteps steady on the stone floor. For once, there was no crowd, no cameras, no relatives waiting to tear them apart. It was only the two of them, standing together beneath the night sky. "You have been given your freedom now," Alexander said gently. "You no longer owe me anything. The contract, the pretense, it is all finished." Emma turned to face him. Her heart should have leapt at the word freedom, but instead, she felt an ache she could not ignore. "And if I want to stay, not as your fiancé on paper, not as your shield against the world, but as myself?" His eyes softened in a way she had rarely seen, the cold armor slipping away. He reached for her hand, wrapping it carefully in his. "Then stay, not because of duty, not because of fear. Stay because you want to, because I do." Her tears spilled freely now, not from humiliation or despair, but from relief. "I thought love was something I had no right to ask for," she whispered. "But you showed me it could be real." Alexander lowered himself slightly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Emma, I choose you, not because you saved me with that kiss, but because every day since, you have made me want to be a better man. You are not my contract, you are my future." The words sank deep into her soul. She pressed the handkerchief into his palm, then guided his hand back to her heart. "Then let us stop pretending. Let us make this real." Under the glow of the city, he drew her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was no longer reckless, no longer a desperate escape, but a promise. It was slow, certain, and filled with every vow they had not spoken aloud. And for the first time, Emma did not feel like a waitress trapped in a gilded cage or a pawn in someone else's bargain. She felt like herself seen, valued, and loved. The story that began with a kiss meant only to defy fate ended with another kiss, one that rewrote their destiny. This time, it was not to escape, but to begin.